Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone just a few moments to filter into the webinar, and then we will get started. But we're glad to see everyone who's coming in as an attendee right now. Welcome, welcome. Okay, welcome again, everyone, to our mystery author panel with the Lincoln Public Library. We've still got a few people trickling in right at this start time. And as we do that, I'll just go over a little bit what tonight's program is going to look like. We'll do some introductions, and then there's going to be a conversation between myself and our three fantastic authors. And then we will have some time at the end for some question and answer. Typically, the best place for that Q&A is to drop that in. Let's see, I'm not actually seeing our Q&A option here on the bottom right now. So you can do something through there or through chat. Otherwise, we will have an audio version at the end of the program, and we can unmute you to ask your question over the course of that. And that works as well for any of our phone-in callers. So with that, welcome again. My name is Kathryn Hunt. I am the director of the Lincoln Public Library. And I have with me three fantastic mystery authors. This is actually the return visit of each of these authors. They've done programs with us before and have graciously agreed to come back and speak with us some more and in this group setting. And so who we have tonight with us in alphabetical order, something we were talking about kind of in the digital green room earlier. We have Claire Booth, who is a former reporter and has written both true crime and mystery fiction, and has lived, across the country and written some really fascinating both fiction and, as I said, true crime books. So we're excited to have Claire with us. We also have James Latois, who promises murder, mystery, and mayhem, and spent over 2 decades in law enforcement and criminal justice. And that informs his novels, many of which take place in the Sacramento area. And then we also have with us Catriona McPherson, who brings a beautiful Scottish accent and sensibility to us here, but has been in California for over a decade. And is a very prolific writer, has done, I believe, over 30 books. Is that about right, Catriona? And including the Dandy Silver series. And so, so these are our authors this evening. One of the things I do want to share with everyone, if you're interested in titles from our authors, which we highly encourage you to read their books and enjoy them, especially because our authors have new titles that are coming out. You can always borrow them from the Lincoln Public Library, but you can also purchase them from one of our partners, which is Face in a Book. And I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see. If you want to purchase any of these titles, including signed copies of the most recent releases from our authors, if you just go to getyourfaceinabook.com, this is the homepage for this local independent bookstore. You scroll down, you'll see that they've been sharing this event, and there's a link down here to purchase signed copies. Once you go there, these are the most recent titles. You can also search any titles by our authors here in the search bar. But when you check out under order comments, you can say deliver to the Lincoln Public Library, and you can pick them up at the library with these authors, with titles from these authors as part of this event we're doing today. So again, if you want to support our authors and get some fantastic books to read, Face in a Book is a great partner who's working with us to provide that. And so with that, welcome everybody. How are you?
Doing well.
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So one of the first kind of questions I wanted to ask you guys, this is our first panel discussion, and I know that you all know each other and work closely with each other. And I was wondering whether any of you would be interested in sharing kind of how writers community works for you and how that ties into your practice as writers. I mean, how much do you guys talk to each other or talk to other writers in the field besides when, libraries send you emails and drag you all into a group Zoom presentation?
I'll start. Okay, after I left the pause. Well, that's a lovely question, because I don't know if you two, Jim and Claire, saw recently on Twitter. Someone gave harsh writing advice. Hashtag harsh writing advice. Other writers are not your pals; they're your competition.
Yeah.
And there was just a deluge of scorn and amusement and bafflement, because, I mean, we're not in competition, and even when we are in competition, even when we're all up for the same award, we're rubbish at being cutthroat competitors. Me personally, on a daily basis, little private messages on Facebook or Twitter or email to share good news, bad news, fears, hopes, thoughts that wouldn't be shared in any other place. And every single day, even when we're apart on social media, we're sharing things and cheering on each other's successes. Unless there's a massive secret group where everybody goes, God, I hate that Catriona McPherson. But tell me now, that would be funny.
There's no such group. No, I do miss the gathering that we usually have every year at different conferences. But you're right. I mean, that connection, it goes beyond the meeting everybody in person. I know personally, I've met so many great people. I mean, these two ladies here, just outstanding authors, and they're friends. I mean, I love their success and everything they do. I just try to support them. And I mean, this community is just so rich. No matter which organization you belong to, whether it's Sisters in Crimes or Mystery Writers of America or International Thriller Writers, it's a big supportive network, and we're all in it to help each other.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think I've never written in another genre. Obviously, there out there, there's romance and there's sci-fi, and I can't speak to those, but we do all our nasty things on the page, and in person, everybody just wants to get along and have fun together, and be supportive. I think a rising tide lifts all boats is kind of the cliched philosophy, that your success is also my success, and it's a bookstore's success and a library's success. We're drawing in, we're making new readers, we're making young readers, and turning them into lifelong readers. And I mean, that's a team effort right there. That's not a solitary thing. And I think it's definitely, you feel that you're part of a broader community.
And this is on social media, because even when we're even in the before times and the after times which are coming, we get together sometimes, but a lot of the time we're separate, and we're on social media staying in touch. And people will suddenly ask a question like, would you know what it meant if I said, don't need any context, someone's editor has said, this makes no sense? And we're checking, do you understand what this means? And you get, within half an hour, you get like dozens of answers, and you can just crowdsource and say, okay. And it sets my mind at ease a lot, especially trying to navigate British and US English. I love that.
And it's also nice to in the same way go and is hokey pokey one word or two, and no one bats an eye, and everyone answers you in all seriousness. So
yes, yeah, no one ever asks, why are you asking? That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I know you guys are fairly well established in your fields. You guys are all published in major publishing houses, have a regular kind of work in writing life. But I wonder if this also ties in, not even something necessarily like, is hokey pokey one word or two, but my sense is that so many people who get into writing, it's not exactly something that, your parents are like, well, we're going to be sending you to writing school because that's where the big money is. Like, it's not like law school. It's not like medical school. It's born of passion and a lot of kind of struggle in dark, lonely rooms, putting together that first kind of manuscript for people to take seriously. And I feel like probably a writer's community is full of people who share that experience in a way that other people perhaps don't know why this story needs to come out on a page and why the character's misbehaving when you're writing it.
Mm. Mm. I think we all came to it a different way. I mean, Claire was a journalist, and Catriona, I mean, is a linguistics professor. And I just, well, yeah, you're still there, doctor.
Right, kiddo. Yeah, oops, sorry, politics.
I kind of came about it. I didn't know I was doing it, but I started writing crime stories when I was a probation officer, and I was interviewing inmates in the jail and taking defendant statements and talking to the witnesses and the victims and writing basically what was a crime story in a pre-sentence report. And my reader was the sentencing judge. So he would get used to a certain turn of phrase that was kind of like he knew what that defendant, what their mind was thinking about the crime, and he'd decide how to sentence them. But that's kind of how it started with me, and it just kind of grew to later I was able to do what I'm doing now.
That's fascinating. Yeah, Catriona or Claire, do either of you guys want to share kind of how your storytelling or writing first kind of moved into this genre? So I think that's really interesting, James, with what you're saying about it being, originally within a very kind of structured context with probation stories. But I can absolutely see that through line into mystery and thriller writing.
Well, I think mine a little bit similar in that I always covered crime when I was a newspaper reporter. And so my first book actually was true crime. And it was about a case that I had covered when I worked in the Bay Area. And I had always loved writing. That's why I worked for newspapers for all those years. And then I did the true crime. And then I thought, let's try fiction. So yeah,
that was perfect timing.
There's the true crime. Thanks, Sam.
That was lovely when you said that, Kathryn, about the support of that. You don't have to account for why you do it with your peers, and that's not always the case with other people who don't. There are some people for whom sitting writing stories, it just doesn't strike them as a job. I'm sure that Jim and Claire have had this experience where you say, I'm working, and someone goes, oh, you're working, you got a job. Yeah, I got a job. I'm a writer, what's wrong with you? For me, I loved language. Obviously, I did a PhD in linguistics. I've always loved language and playing with language. And my linguistics PhD was one of those ones that can always win you the brownie for who did the most useless sounding PhD. And what do you call major professor, that I would call the supervisor, said at the end, when I was finished, he said that's the closest anyone ever got to writing a science fiction novel, and then got a linguistics PhD for it. So I was really pushing it, and then I turned it into a novel, but not as awful as that sounds, because I really cut out almost all of the theory and turned it into a time travel caper eventually. So yeah, it was always there. It was always there for me about language. When I was very quick. When I was a wee girl, I wanted to be a procurator fiscal, which is someone in the law enforcement legal area in Scotland. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to be a procurator fiscal. So basically I wanted to be a writer. I just loved the sound of the phrase procurator fiscal.
That's so interesting, Catriona, because it reminds me a little bit of some of the discussions around Tolkien and his work and his strong belief in the connection between language and story, that we build language to tell the stories that matter to us, and you can't separate language from those stories that it formed and was formed by. But then you added time travel.
he worked in the department where I was a professor when I was a professor, and no one knew which office was his office. So I just thought, well, I'll just assume it's mine then. I am sitting here in J.R.R. Tolkien's office at the University of Leeds. Yeah. Well, he thought of the study of the language was the scholarship, and these stories that he wrote were sort of on the tea break almost. He didn't respect his own literary output as much as he respected his work on the dialects of English, which is incredible when you think of it now. Yeah,
Right, when you think of the impact.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Culturally, who's read more, which body of his work has been read more widely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read all of his dialects. No, I have not. I've not read any of those.
I've seen them. I've seen the tomes, the Survey of English Dialects. It was a wonderful work of scholarship that can be done much more easily now with a computer to do a huge study of a corpus of English. But he did it, basically with a quill almost. So, yeah.
Looping back to something you said a little bit earlier with kind of, oh, you're working, you got a job. One of the kind of mantras that I've heard a lot over the past year, obviously, we're coming on to a year of stay-at-home orders and quarantine and living our lives virtually. But one of the mantras that, has resonated true for me and that I like is this idea that, like, if you've made it through COVID-19, thank an artist. And that through this time, we have all been investing so much of our time and energy and sanity in stories, whether it's reading, whether it's, the even greater rise of streaming video, all of those pieces. Have you guys felt that in this time, as kind of culturally, we've turned even more into stories, that your relationship to your work has changed, or the way people talk to you about your work has changed?
Question.
I haven't seen anybody talk differently about it outside the community. Inside, I think we shared, or at least that I've seen, initially there was this period of just unfocus. How am I going to get through this next manuscript? I can't even see past today. What am I doing? And I think that's kind of gradually let go. At least I've felt it. And yeah, I've read a ton the last year, and just thrown myself into work, so I could ignore what's going on outside. So it's been productive in that case. But yeah, it's kind of made me develop ways to refocus and regain that focus that I lost initially, because there were a couple of months that I was useless.
Yeah, me too. I think I was having a conversation with my agent last week, because I turned a book in, and she put it perfectly. She said, last spring we were over and underreacting, like we were bleaching our apples, but we thought it would all be over by mid-July. So at the same, and I think for me, I thought, I don't need to focus at the moment. I'll just wait till it's over. And then we realized it wasn't going to be over. I remember Neil and I, my husband and I, panicking that we thought, oh, this is going well. We're getting some stuff, we're catching up with things, and it's quite nice, and it's a pause. I don't think it's going to last long enough. Maybe we'll just take June as well, even though it'll all be over. Hollow laughter, right? But but I read and read and read and read, and I think mostly the change that I've seen is people saying, where's the next book? When they know that it's a book a year, and they know that the series books come out a year apart, but people are really, and I'm doing it as well. I'm emailing people saying, I'll read it like that if I have to. This is Clea Simon's follow up to that wonderful One Night Gone. What was it called? The one about the Boston club scene in the 80s. So I've said, I'll read it. I want my hands on it. So I think we've become more avid. I have anyway. What about you, Claire?
I think so. I definitely agree that, if you've made it this far, thank an artist. I love that. In all formats, right? Even now, poetry right? With Amanda Gorman and all the wonderful young poets out there that just, you know, it helps you survive and takes your mind out of it, and helped
Audiobooks.
when I was in the rubbish stage, as you would say, Catriona, you know, in March and April and May, where, you know, I couldn't concentrate on my own work, that at least I had other people's completed books to keep me happy. So,
And audiobooks, I was going to say as well, because so many people just couldn't sleep. I mean, just you lie down and I've never in my life done this, but like buds in and listen to something just tranquil and something I've already read, so it doesn't matter that I'm going to miss it because I fall asleep. So I think people have been buying and or renting and consuming audiobooks. Well, have you noticed it at the library, Kathryn, that there's been a change in people taking audiobooks out?
A lot of audiobooks. The big shift, of course, we saw with limited access was the move toward digital media. So e-audiobooks and ebooks as well. But I think even without not being able to sleep, there's something to say about audiobooks. At least personally, I found kind of in that same time period you guys are talking about last March, last April, my ability to sit down and read anything was shot. It's all I wanted to do. And 3 minutes in, I'd find myself back on my phone, doom scrolling to see whether COVID had changed in, 5 minutes.
yes.
Yeah.
And an audiobook didn't let, was different enough. I could listen when I couldn't read. I could panic clean my house because that would change everything if I could just get all of my clothes in the right order and listen to an audiobook, in a way that trying to sit down and read in print was very difficult. So it sounds like you guys.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Finish your thought, Catriona.
Oh, I was going to say, because the book that I was just discussing with my agent is set, starts Friday the 13th of March 2020 and runs for a week and a half. And it's about that time. And it feels like historical fiction now, writing it now to write about last March. It took almost as much research as writing about the 1930s.
I bet. Claire, James, have you guys seen with what you're working on? Has the last year bled into that? Has COVID shown up as a plot point or a piece of background information?
Mine, no. I'm working on the 5th book in my series, and that would have been a hard left in the middle to suddenly throw the pandemic in. And it'll be interesting for the next one. So I think what I do with it, because it's going to have to be addressed at some point. It's not a blip. You got to figure out in a series how to.
Does your series progress year by year, Claire?
No, it kind of actually in between the book that just came out and the previous one, it's only a couple of weeks.
Oh, right.
But then the one I'm working on now is several months. So it varies a little bit.
Oh, that's lovely.
So at least there's no hard and fast. I can jump ahead as much as I want to, I think, this one. I guess, do I want?
Joe, I must say, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have used it as a background for a sweeping novel. I thought, I'm going to write a closed circle, like sudden isolation in this last ditch motel in Schmavis, California, that I write about. I'm just going to make it the first week of the lockdown and everybody's in there and someone dies, because it seems like, someone's murdered. But I don't think, but anything else I write, I'm going to swerve it somehow and maybe just write a book set earlier. Just cheat and go back to maybe 2010 or something like that, because I don't want to have it there in the background of a story that's not about it.
So I'm curious, Catriona, do you then consider it a lucky circumstance that Dandy Gilver is in the 30s and
Yes.
series you don't have to worry about it?
Yes, exactly. I thought the best thing was no forensics, but this is pretty good. But you know, the funny thing is that the Spanish flu basically never turned up in the fiction written then or just after then. So I'm wondering if maybe we won't. Maybe there won't be a lot of COVID fiction. Don't know. What are you going to do, Jim?
Yeah, I finished 2 books during the lockdown, and in both of them, COVID was not a primary point. I think in one I made some comment about some social distancing thing, but I kind of did it purposely that I didn't want to have the reader dwell on COVID, because I mean, too many people we know lost somebody or had it affect them somehow. And personally, I want to leave that in the past, get past it, get through it, and let's move on. I mean, it's painful. So I chose to, whether it's right or wrong, I chose to go a different direction with it and not directly deal with it in the book.
And I've written a comedy set in the first week, but somehow it feels different because it is the first week. You know, it's not as time goes on, and it's not as people are losing loved ones. To me, it feels different. Let's see.
So I'm curious, Jim, as part of your decision, and also I'm going to guess an answer because I know you, but do you kind of feel that your job or your ability is to help take your reader away? And so you don't want to immerse them in COVID when they're living in COVID, and you would rather tell them a good story?
I think that's part of it. Try to get them, just disconnect from everything you're going through now. Let's go on a ride and take a story. It might be a very dark story, but it's a different kind of story. But yeah, just get up out of that, disconnect, and go on a different journey with me.
That's so interesting because it's not going to be like you skipping into the meadows to pick daisies and, you know, make daisy chains because it's your book. But it's very different to go on a dark journey at one remove. Mm-hmm. Yeah, see that.
That resonates with me, Jim, because as anyone who's kind of been on some of these different sessions, has probably heard me talk about this, but the first thing I read during lockdown was a history of the Black Death in the 13th century. I was just, and it was dark and it was resonant to what was going on, but it was also like, well, civilization continued, so I can move forward with this one. So my poor staff got, inundated with plague facts from me every day as I, came in with a new chapter. And,
I reread The Stand last April, Stephen King's The Stand, and it was so awful that you close the book and go, it's only COVID, in a weird kind of way, because the reality was not as bad. But again, I don't think I could read it now. That was when it was early and we didn't know how it was going to be.
Absolutely.
Or maybe I'm just cold.
So with kind of this duration of kind of being in the same place, Claire, your series actually takes place in the Ozarks, correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
So that's a very different place from where you live and where you've been for the last little bit. How has the process of writing in that place without having, I don't know how frequently you travel there as part of your research and experience of these novels, but has having that removed as an option, has that changed your process at all?
Not really. Partially because my husband is from there, and we still have family there, and so if nothing else, I can call up my mother-in-law and say, I need you to go to the intersection of such and such and smell it. I need to know what it smells like. So I'm very lucky in that I can task those couple of people with helping me out, now obviously that I can't go back every year or two. But yeah, that was why I wanted to set them there. I was familiar with that through my husband. So
I feel like that's another question that falls under the things you can only ask other writers or people who know writers without getting a lot of strange looks. Can you tell me what this intersection smells like?
Or who are chained to you through marriage. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
They know you as a writer.
Yes.
But the smell,
that's so true.
That's
Yeah.
so true. Yeah, the smell, you can't Google, the little Google orange man is not going to tell you what something smells like. That's the problem. Yeah.
Now, Jim, your novels, is your most recent one set in the Sacramento area?
The last two are set in Sacramento. The next one coming out in July, Black Label, is actually set in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
So has your process changed at all with the change in where and when we can travel? Or have you found that your process has been pretty consistent with this?
I think the process has been consistent. And what I'm writing now, the research was done, any research I had to do or checking out sites for locations was done, a year or so ago. So yeah, I'm familiar with San Francisco there. And then the next series that's going to start in 2022 is set in Phoenix in Arizona. And I was down there quite frequently. My son lived down there. So we were checking out the spots in the desert. Oh, this would be a good place to bury a body and, that kind of thing, things that you do with the family.
Oh, brilliant. And now, Katrina, yours is set often in the 1930s. But your most recent one you said was set in this kind of locked room, week and a half long story was set in this general area. Was that?
Yeah, in Davis, in a lightly fictionalized Davis. Yeah. Yeah. And like Jim, I've been coasting. I wrote something I had already researched and then wrote that one that's set here. So it's now when I'm just about to start, probably on Monday, start a new contemporary novel that's set in Scotland, and this is something that I would have been last summer. I would have been there, sitting on a rock, listening to ravens and feeling the breeze and things like that. So I'm feeling a bit of trepidation because setting's really, really, really important to me, and it's where I start. I always start. I don't know much about the plot, but I always start by going to the place where I've decided a book's going to be and just tramping about and soaking it in. And now I'm going to have to do it without that. But it's somewhere that's about 20 miles from where I was born, so it's not going to be too much of a stretch. But I'm a bit worried about it. Yeah.
Big shift from how you normally approach that, even though it is a place that you can know.
Yeah. So I think what I'll do is make it a more imaginary place than usual. I'll put it geographically in the right kind of area, but I'll just make up a setting so that I can't get it wrong.
Fantastic. No, I think that's a great approach. Give yourself that wiggle room to build that story through. Let me see. So with that, speaking of stories and everything, it sounds like you all have been finishing up projects in this last little bit, but just because I know all of our readers at the library love to know what you are enjoying reading. What have you guys read recently that's been great?
You go first, Katrina.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, so I just finished about 10 minutes before I came on this call, a novel called The Postscript Murders by Ellie Griffiths, who writes a series, but this is a standalone. And speaking of smell, she said at one point, the daffodil stalk freshness of new books. I thought, isn't that just perfect way to describe the smell of a new book, as fresh as a daffodil stalk? And I'm just about to start. Is that back to front?
That's
Yeah.
you're good. You're good.
No, that's
Yeah.
good.
Winter Counts by the best named author ever, David Heska Wanbley Wyden, if I've said that right, which is up for the Edgar Award for best debut novel.
Best
And
novel.
so, yeah, is that right? Yeah, best
Yep.
debut. Yeah. So I'm just about. That's why it's on my desk, because I'm just about to start it. And also, Alyssa Cole wrote "When They See You, When I See You," something that's also up for an Edgar. So I did a lot of Edgar related shopping, and it was just fantastic if you like domestic noir. So it's about the gentrification of a Brooklyn neighborhood, and it was described as Get Out meets Rear Window, and it was just one of those like sit up all night books.
Fantastic. And now for anyone who's maybe not familiar, the Edgar Awards are mystery awards, correct?
Yeah, they're sort of the Oscars of mystery fiction. I think it's safe to say they're the most prestigious mystery award, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Jim, I think this is where we point out that Catriona is a multiple nominee.
Of every award, there's Anthony and Agatha, and
Four-time loser. No, I've sat in that room going, "Oh, well done." But yeah, and judge. So have you judged? Because I've judged the Mary Higgins Clark Award. It was great.
I judged best debut.
I did best debut last year for the Edgars.
Yeah.
So the postie just keeps coming with books for you. What you call them, the mail carrier just keeps bringing books, book after book after book.
It's like Christmas all year long.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Owl Post at the start of the first Harry Potter, except it's books.
Part of my reading this year was for Minotaur St. Martin's first novel contest that they have.
Oh,
this is my second year doing it, and you get these first time unpublished authors and their manuscripts, and some of them are really, really, really bad. And I was one of those. I submitted to this contest 10 years ago, and that was at the time where you got a postcard with your judge's name and their address, and you boxed up your manuscript and you sent it to them.
Oh my!
Oh wow!
I got Tasha Alexander, or Tasha.
Oh.
Yeah. So
yeah,
she knows her stuff. Very Regency kind of romance.
Yeah.
It's not my genre, but I tracked her down at VoucherCon a few years back and apologized for sending the stuff that I sent her back. But she said she said that it didn't ring a bell to her that it was there, so that was probably a good thing, because she said there was a horrible time. But out of the batch of 80, I think 84 of those this year, there were 3 that were, really, really good. So hopefully they can get something going with St. Martin's and get a good deal.
Very good. So there's more of that community, right? You're doing that out of love for the genre and the writers who are coming up.
So now, James, and you're saying that there are some that are, there were 3 that were brilliant. These are unpublished authors who are working on manuscripts. A lot that need a lot of work. As a judge, do you ever give feedback to the ones that kind of fall in the middle, the ones that have promise but aren't quite there yet? Or is it something where, as a judge, that's really not in your purview to reach out and do?
I think in most competitions like this, and this is one of them, you have no contact with the author. I think you even sign a non-disclosure agreement with the publisher that you can't discuss specific manuscripts. So no, they don't know what they've submitted. They don't know if it's good. They don't know if it's bad. And to be fair, there were a lot that were very good. But since this is the best of competition, you can only pick, 1 or 2 to move on. And it's a shame, because there's some new names out there. So it makes you feel good that there's some new blood coming up that's going to be very, very, very good.
So now, Claire, you said that you'd also done some judging with Debut for the Edgars. What's your experience been like with that? I'm curious, with all of you having done this, kind of your perspective on this contribution to the community and kind of the pluses and minuses of doing all the reading for these awards. So yeah, Claire, what's your experience been?
Oh, it was wonderful. I chaired the committee that judged the best debut, and we had about 80 or 90 books. And we as a committee decided on, and there's a whole list of rules that as judges you have to follow. So obviously we followed those. But then as a committee, we decided that we were going to assign a letter grade to every book. And someone would finish a book, they'd email me their grade, and I would put it in a spreadsheet that everybody had access to. And so we could kind of keep tabs on what people were thinking. And it was very interesting. Most of them, people were pretty, had kind of the same thoughts. People give them B's or C's. Some of them, it was very interesting. You had a couple of A's and people were giving it flat out F's, very divergent opinions. That didn't happen too often. And then there were the ones that just blew everybody away, without question. Oh, and actually I'll recommend the one that ended up winning was called She Rides Shotgun.
Oh,
by a guy named Jordan Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a short read. It's not very long. Absolutely exceptional. It's about a 12 or 13-year-old girl whose dad is on the run from the white supremacist gang that he had been a part of. And she is the narrator. She's the protagonist. It just a exceptional book. It was really, really good.
One of the things I like about judging for the Edgars is it forced me to kind of read outside my comfort zone. I don't read a lot of cozies, with the exception of maybe Katrina's stuff and Eileen Rindall. And Eileen's fantastic. But it kind of makes you kind of spread your wings a little bit and get into some books that you wouldn't normally get into, and you kind of discover some good things that way.
Yeah. Did you, we didn't read, the year that I did it, we didn't read the whole of every book, but we read respectfully
which
and attentively.
Judge?
It was the Mary Higgins Clark Award. So it was quite small, but it, and some books weren't actually within the remit, because there's a very narrow remit for that award, which I can still remember. A young woman with an interesting job and primarily good family relations falls into trouble through no fault of her own. So there you go, with no strong foul language on screen, sex or gratuitous violence. So but we respectfully and attentively read 50 pages of everything. But there comes a point when you think the best novel this year cannot have this first 50 pages. It doesn't matter what the rest of the book's like. This first 50 pages can't be the best novel this year. But we read quite a lot of them. Did you read all the way through every one, Claire?
No. And I guess I
for the
did
same reason, I'm guessing. Yeah.
We did the flip side of that coin, especially as the year progressed, and publishers, true to form, waited. They're supposed to send it as soon as it's released, but they don't, and it gets to be October, and all of a sudden, you're inundated with entries. But you read the first 50 pages and you go, this is not going to make my top 10.
Yeah.
That maybe me personally, I would sit down, I would read this book completely. I know I would enjoy it, but as a judge, I know it's not going to make the top 10 that then everybody's going to vote on.
That's the only downside to doing it, is that after the year of doing all that judging, when you've had, 50, however many, or 80, 90 in Claire's case, when you start to read, you have to train yourself out of the habit of thinking, I'll read 50 pages and stop. If it's not, if it's not the best thing I've ever read.
That does make me feel a little bit better. So I was hearing you guys drop like 60, 80, 90, and I was going to be like, and you guys wrote and promoted books at the same time?
Oh, I will say that, you guys know Mark Stevens, right? He's a writer in Colorado. Has wonderful books. He chaired the best novel category. 500 books was how many they had. And so they actually literally divvied it up, and a little group got 100 each, I think he was telling me. But 90 was not so bad when you take into account kind of thing. So, but yes, it's fun to do.
Well, I've still got plenty of questions for you guys, but we are 45 minutes in. So I'm going to see whether any of our audience members have questions for you. It does look like our settings on this particular webinar got a little sideways, so it doesn't look like we have the chat option. So if you want to ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand, or if you're dialing in, do *9, that will raise your hand. I will basically request for you to unmute yourself. You'll see that request come through on the screen for your Zoom. Okay, I see that we have Linda. So Linda, go ahead.
I wanted to ask what was going to be happening with Boucheron, seeing as how it didn't come to Sacramento and we didn't get to see all of our friends there who are our friends here tonight. I was hoping they could tell us something. Thanks.
But it's the online version of it is still available if you go and look. It's on YouTube, so all the panels are still there, and all the interviews and things are still there. Sorry, I'm speaking clear. You were on the committee. You should be the one speaking.
You were the
about
Toastmistress.
Oh yeah, that's right. But so at BoucherCon this year in New Orleans, at the moment they're taking registrations and people are booking hotel rooms for August. So
I would find that website. I know that they will keep posting updates on that. If you're interested in going to New Orleans, that they keep that updated as to, if there would be any changes as far as that goes. But that's a great point, Katrina, is that it is on YouTube. So, or if, you're watching tonight and you want to find out a little bit more about what BoucherCon is, we have a channel on YouTube for what would have been the Sacramento BoucherCon, which we did turn virtual. And so all the guests of honor did interviews. Katrina was one of our guests of honor and had a wonderful interview with a good friend writer of hers, and all of our other guests of honor did too. And then we had a bunch of panels like this that you can just go back and watch, if you're interested. And obviously you can do that on your own time schedule, since they're all just up on YouTube. But I love that you asked, and I love that people want to go, because it's a wonderful thing.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's a link to both the conference, where you can find more information about that, and the current one, as well as we'll get the link to that YouTube channel with all those. We'll put together an email to send back out to everyone who's registered for this webinar, since we don't have the chat to drop that in right now. So let's see, and we've got Barbara.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm 66 years old, and due to kind of an undiagnosed learning disability, I've never been a reader. I've probably read 10 books to my first 65 years that were for enjoyment, because I just couldn't follow them, couldn't maintain them, couldn't do anything. And then now I have eyesight. And with COVID coming and not being able to do anything, Sam at your library hooked me up with Hoopla and Libby, and I'm using Glass, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's a Georgia library. And I have really gotten into the audiobooks. I set myself a goal to read 100 books. I just finished my 36th. Katerina, yours is the only one I could find on an audio, and I just finished one of yours. So please, and I do appreciate, Kathryn, that you guys publish on Facebook in advance what you're going to do in your book clubs, because I'm reading all of those books. When you have events like this, I research to see if I can find the authors. So please keep putting that out as far in advance, because some of those books are not easy to find right away. So, but thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that.
Here.
And thanks, Sam, for being so pushy.
Oh, we're a big Sam fan club here.
We're a big
Yeah.
fan club.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, that was just lovely to think of 10 books in 65 years and then 100, getting to 100 in year 66. That's marvelous.
That's fantastic. And that's great to hear that that's useful. For any of our attendees who aren't familiar, Sam is the man behind the curtain, making all of the technical side happen. He coordinates these events. He's one of our staff members here at the Lincoln Public Library. Let's see. It looks like we've got a question from Rita. Rita, you're good to talk.
Por favor. Here we go, I think.
Here we go.
Okay, this question is really for you, James. I'm a Bay Area expatriate, and so many mystery writers write books about San Francisco. Well, let's face it, Oakland would be much more fertile territory for writing a crime or, let's be honest. And, it really would work very well, and you've got some Berkeley connections, etc. Can you sort of tell me why? I guess San Francisco has the glamour, and maybe throughout the country it would sell better, but I often wonder, why no Oakland East 14th Street focus?
Actually, there are a few authors that write Oakland-based crime fiction, more of the hard-boiled stuff. Rob Pierce writes out of Oakland, but I think you're right. San Francisco has kind of this universal appeal. People know it. They know it when they see it. You see San Francisco, you see the Golden Gate Bridge, you see Coit Tower, the Transamerica building. People identify the setting right away. And having worked the law enforcement side of San Francisco, there's a little dark underbelly in the city there too.
Oh, I worked there. I know.
Yeah. Okay. So
And actually, James, when I read, do I say it right? Les Croat, John Le Crow's books.
Right.
I mean, I know exactly where he is, what street, etc. I trail him through the neighborhoods, and that's exciting. But again, I just sort of wonder about, shall we say, a more fertile field in the East Bay.
Go for it. I would say, Rita, there you go. Go, you do it. That's what I'm saying. If you, but I'm not being flippant. I'm saying if you've got a sense of place like that, and you think this would be a good place, maybe just start with a short story. I'm assuming you're not a writer. And I apologize if you are.
I was a litigator, but that's a whole other story.
There you go. I think you're halfway there.
Thank you.
You've got knowledge of the law and you've got a setting.
This is it. Thank you all very much. And maybe one of you could finish by explaining to me the difference between mystery and true crime. I just read them all and I don't really get it. The difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, so true crime is nonfiction.
Well, yeah.
Is completely honest to God, true from start to finish. A mystery is fiction, or a thriller, or anything along those lines. You'd find in the fiction section, and those are made up. They can have real elements, or they can fold in, say, a real crime into whatever the fiction is. I know you know, a lot of books they'll reference the Manson murders, or they'll do, you know, they'll talk about
Or the Twin Towers,
or real happenings, but the book is still fiction. True crime is all true. And if you're any good, it's all, I mean, you're not even putting in quote marks what's not a quote. It's reporting, and it's you know, research, and all true. My true crime book actually was a quintuple murder that, speaking of East Bay, happened in Concord.
Oh,
And so, you know, I went to court, police reports, interviews with police, with family members, court transcripts, all sorts of things. And then, so if there's a quote in my true crime book, it came from either an interview I did or a court transcript or something like that. But it's all true.
okay, I get it. In fact, that young woman whose last name was Dugard, if we wrote about her kidnapping and all of her adventures, of course.
Oh, yes. That was right the area that I used to cover.
Mhm. I lived in Mirage, so I know.
A mutual friend of all of us, a writer called Hank Philippi Ryan, did she not write a novel version based on that case?
Oh, yeah.
She had been writing a true crime book to be published, and she was getting all ready before the verdict, and then the verdict went a way that no one thought it would go, and she had to just pack her book away, and it never got published. And then years and years later, I mean, many years later, she decided that she'd take that experience and turn it into a novel. I can't remember what it's called now. Can anyone else remember?
Well, thank you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
And Meg Gardner. Oh, I was going to say Meg Gardner as well. She wrote Unsub about the Golden
Right.
State Killer, and just as her book was coming out, they caught the guy, which was you know, like how much do you think about yourself as a writer, and how much do you think about justice in the community?
Let's see. We're coming just to the top of the hour. Do you have any other questions from our attendees? Go ahead and raise your hand. That way I can add you in as a speaker. Oh, we've got one from Chris. So Chris, if you can just unmute.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
There we go.
I have noticed that chapters are getting shorter and shorter in a lot of things I read. It might be a page, it might be 2 pages. Have you, as you all have been writing for a while, are you making your chapters get shorter and shorter, or are you staying with a certain style that you have? And how do you know when a chapter's done, that it's not just a scene break within it? Do you think about it? It just seems to be something that's happening all over now, and I wonder how each of you do that.
I think you're right. They are. I know that the historical series I write that's set in the 30s, the chapters are much, much longer than the books I write that are set now. And the chapters are maybe about 12 pages of typing. They're not James Patterson, you know, poem length chapters, almost sometimes sonnet length. But there, do you know Charles Todd, Claire and Jim, right? The mother-son writing team, Charles and Caroline Todd. And we were together at a convention called Miles Domestic a few years ago, and they had finished their book. It was done, the story was done, and they said, we're not going to the bar, we're going upstairs to put the chapter breaks in.
Oh my
And
gosh.
everyone thought, what? Isn't that weird? Isn't that odd?
Yeah, seems like it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I keep track. And so I have a certain word count that I like my chapters to be at. And I don't like them particularly short. I guess I'm very middle of the road. I shoot for about 2,000 words a chapter. And so I know when I keep an eye on it, so I know when I'm coming up to needing to be getting on to the next chapter. But then also, and I guess you could argue that James Patterson, it's pacing with him too. His pace is just breakneck speed the entire way. I shorten mine as it gets toward the end of the book.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To hopefully just subconsciously carry you faster and faster and faster to the end.
It's interesting.
But I don't get that short. Because I do think you're right that things do kind of seem to be shortening up as a whole.
But I've never heard that about keeping it sort of the same length. And I think for a reader, that might be comforting because you sort of know each time about how much information you're going to take in. I've never thought of that, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I've been seeing the same thing too. The chapters seem to be getting shorter and shorter. I tend to write a little shorter, and it's actually been an issue that my agent and I have been going back and forth on. She wants longer chapters. I like shorter, faster pacing.
Huh.
And I think it, in terms of a chapter break or however you structure it, I think it's based around what has to happen in that time, place, and setting, and then that's your break. But I think you just always leave them with a hook to make them want to dive into the next chapter, short or long. You just want that hook to get the reader to move on. And Claire's got a great point about pacing towards the end.
I'd say one more thing about pacing yourself as a reader towards the end. If publishers are going to keep doing that thing where they put the first chapter of the next book on the end of this book, and you're sitting there going, oh, I've got a lovely big hot cup of coffee, I've got just the right amount of this book left to read, this is heaven. And then you turn the page at the end and the next, and it's the first chapter of the next book. I don't know anyone that likes that.
That happened to me today. Sorry. I was just going to say that happened to me today, and I hated it. I was actually upset by, I've never heard anyone mention it, but I was
on behalf
really
of mystery writers, we apologize.
But or at least make it so that there's a colored, like a dark edge to the page, so you can tell when you look at the book, this isn't the novel, this bit at the back is something else.
Yep.
So that you can adjust your expectations and time your reading.
Thank you.
Speaking of books, Chris, when does yours come out?
April 13th. Yeah.
This is Chris Calvin.
Yes.
Oh,
I didn't have, my headset wasn't working, so I probably sound odd, but.
of course. No, you don't. You sound like my friend that I've known for 10 years. I'm just an idiot.
And speaking of community, people here who have helped me a great deal. Thank you. But yeah, it's exciting.
That's
Thanks.
awesome, Chris. Great.
Thank you, Jim.
Congratulations.
Good sleuth in there, Jim. I didn't know who that was.
Well, thank you, Chris. And on that, I think kind of my last thing for us to wrap up is for Jim, Claire, and Catriona. If you guys want to just give us real quick what's kind of coming up next for you, if you want to share a little bit about the books that have just come out, what the appetite of all of our attendees to head over to Face in a Book and pick those up. I just want to give you each a couple minutes to kind of talk about what's coming up next and what's exciting. And we can go in alphabetical or reverse alphabetical, or I can't say anti-alphabetical, like a non-alphabetical order. I'm a librarian, I'll get hives, but
Alphabetical, you go, Claire.
If this was in person, I'd throw something at you.
Mail it.
Okay. So the book that just came out for me is the fourth book in my Sheriff Hank Worth series, which is set in the Missouri Ozarks down in Branson, Missouri. And Hank is a 30-something sheriff. He hasn't been there too long, and he's not from the area. So he's still learning all the ins and outs in a pretty insular Ozark community. And in this book, the third book kind of ended in a cliffhanger with a family problem. And so this fourth book starts off right away with him trying to address this family problem with one of his wife's family members without his wife knowing, and goes up to Columbia, which is a town a couple of hours away, and where I went to college. So that was fun to revisit, at least in my head. I didn't get to go there, but I got to set quite a bit of the book there, and so that was fun for me. But yeah, so then it kind of has some dual plot lines going on with him up in that city, and then everybody else back home, where there is another murder that they've got to solve. So fun to write, and I love that area, and I love my setting, and so yeah, and it works as a standalone, but it's the fourth one in the series, and so those ones are available too.
Brilliant.
Great.
Brilliant. Jim, what have you been up to?
Been up to a lot. The most recently published book is Bury the Past. In Bury the Past, it's the follow-up of From At What Cost. Bury the Past features the female detective lead, Paula Newberry. And Paula is investigating a new murder and finds DNA on the victim from a guy who has the ultimate alibi. He's already in prison. And it's a guy that she put in prison. So immediately people start to question the integrity of her case or investigation, and the killer gets out and starts targeting Paula for putting him away the first time. In July, I've got a new one coming out. It's called Black Label. It's a little bit different. It's we all kind of take for granted what's in our prescriptions, but do we really know? And this kind of takes a dive at big pharma. And my protagonist is a female pharmaceutical executive, wakes up in a strange apartment, doesn't know how she got there, and is accused of murdering her CEO boss. And she's basically a little gaslighting going on, convinced that she either did it or she's crazy. And then she uncovers a counterfeit drug lab that she's been, on paper at least, running out of her pharmaceutical business. So it was fun. It's a fun light read.
It sounds like you would have had to do a lot of research to get that, and a lot of research that would make people take you by the collar and hustle you out of the building. Like, how do you?
Yeah, it's amazing what you can find out with a $15 copay at your primary care physician.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The corner of your file's going to be turned down now.
Yeah.
And oh God, here he comes. Here he comes.
Here he comes again.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. And those are two really cool jackets. So I've got two very different things just recently come out. One set in 1937, about 10 miles from where I was born in Edinburgh. Private detective. My private detective, who I've been writing about for 15 years now, is trying to solve the case of a ferry woman who will not take her ferry out. Oh no, that's the next one. Never mind. That will not. Sorry, Sam. She won't take the ferry out in good weather. She'll only go on the river when it's bad weather, and no one can work out why. So that's the beginning of that book. And the other one is set in the slightly fictionalized Davis. Opens on Valentine's Day, when a local statue, which doesn't really exist in Davis, is stolen, and one of its toes is sent back with a ransom note saying 9 more where this came from. And then the same thing happens to the beloved wife of a local dentist, except it's one of her acrylics. It's not that gory. So it's a caper about kidnapping and dating, which was great fun to write. Lexi Campbell decides that she's going to put herself out there and start dating. So, so glad I was married as I wrote that.
Fantastic. Those sound like amazing books, definitely on my reading list. And again, for any of our attendees, Face in a Book, get your faceinabook.com, or just Google Face in a Book, or of course, your local public library. Any of your friendly librarians would be happy to connect you with these books as we get them in, or any of the other books by our authors. But otherwise, I want to respect your guys' evening. We've already gone over a little bit, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always wonderful to get to talk with you. You're all so insightful about your practice and just a lot of fun to have. So thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. And then, we'll be doing more author events over the next couple months. Keep an eye out. Our Friends of the Lincoln Library newsletter, our website, the City of Lincoln e-bulletin, or our Facebook. We post all of our events across those venues. And have a wonderful night, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.